Imagine waking up completely alone, not in a city, not in a hospital, but in deep space. No warning, no explanation, no way back to sleep. Now imagine discovering something even worse. You didn't wake up early by accident. You woke up 90 years too soon. Everyone else is still asleep. Thousands of people frozen in time, dreaming their way toward a future you will never see. And they will stay that way until you are dead. That is the nightmare at the heart of Passengers. And this is not a movie about space. It is a movie about loneliness, about fear, and about what happens to morality when no one is watching. Passengers begins with a perfect system. A massive starship called Avalon traveling through deep space, carrying more than 5,000 people. They're not awake. They're not aware. They're not afraid. They're sleeping through a 120-year journey to a distant planet. The promise is simple. You go to sleep. You wake up decades later, and you begin a new life. No pain, no waiting, no sacrifice, until something goes wrong. Very wrong. Jim Preston wakes up. No alarms. No emergency crew. No explanation. Just silence. Endless corridors, empty rooms, perfectly functioning machines. At first, Jim believes it is temporary, a system error, a glitch that will fix itself. But hours turn into days, and days turn into weeks. And the truth slowly becomes impossible to ignore. There is no button to press, no override command, no return to hibernation. Jim Preston is awake, and he is alone, completely alone. The ship still works. The lights still turn on. The food is still warm. But none of it matters, because meaning does not exist without witnesses. The Avalon is beautiful, luxurious, flawless. But it is not freedom. It is a floating prison. And Jim is serving a life sentence with no parole. Time begins to lose shape. There are no seasons, no birthdays, no aging faces. Weeks blur into months, and months dissolve into years. The movie shows something deeply unsettling here. Jim does not lose his mind all at once. He erodes, slowly and quietly. He talks to machines, repeats routines, and laughs less. This is not madness. This is psychological starvation. The ship offers artificial companionship. Robots, programs, entertainment, endless distractions. But none of them choose Jim. And that is the difference. Humans do not only need interaction. They need to be seen. They need to be chosen. And then Jim sees her. Aurora Lane, still asleep, still untouched by time, still full of future. She is everything Jim has lost. Time, choice, possibility. He reads her profile, learns her dreams, her plans, her hopes. She wants to write. She wants to experience a new world. She wants a future Jim will never have. And that is when the movie asks its most dangerous question. If you were truly alone for the rest of your life, would you stay moral? Or would you choose survival? Even if survival meant destroying someone else's future? Passengers does not answer that question. It hands it to you. And once that question exists, there is no escaping it. Up to this point, the movie quietly builds empathy. Jim is not aggressive. He's not cruel. He's not unstable. He's polite, funny, normal. And that's intentional, because Passengers doesn't want you to judge him yet. It wants you to understand him first. Loneliness doesn't scream. It whispers. The film avoids dramatic breakdowns. There is no screaming, no madness montages. Instead, loneliness appears as routine. Jim wakes up, eats alone, walks empty corridors, talks to machines. This is how isolation really works. It doesn't explode. It wears you down. Arthur, the bartender robot, becomes Jim's closest thing to a friend. Always smiling, always polite, always available. But there's something disturbing about him. Arthur listens, but he doesn't feel. He gives advice without consequence, truth without empathy. And the movie quietly makes a point. Artificial companionship can delay loneliness, but it can't cure it. Time stops meaning anything. There are no seasons, no ahin fases, no milestones. Jim realizes something terrifying. He will die long before the ship arrives. And when the others wake up, they will find his skeleton. Forgotten, unremembered, unchosen. This thought breaks something inside him. Aurora becomes an obsession. Jim doesn't approach her immediately. He watches her, not in a predatory way, but in a desperate one. He reads her profile, her dreams, her plans. She wants to be a writer. She wants to experience a new world. She wants a future. Everything Jim will never have. This is where the movie becomes a psychological battlefield. Jim argues with himself. He walks away. He comes back. He drinks. He hesitates. The film stretches this moment deliberately, because this isn't about the action. It's about the process of justification. The script shows something uncomfortable but real. Jim doesn't tell himself he's evil. He tells himself stories. She'll wake up anyway someday. She'll be happier with me than alone. I can give her a good life. These aren't lies we tell others. These are lies we tell ourselves. Eventually, loneliness wins. Not rage. Not lust. Not cruelty. Loneliness. Jim opens the pod. Aurora wakes up, and in that single moment, he saves himself and destroys her future. The film doesn't use dramatic music here, because it doesn't need to. The horror is quiet. Aurora believes it was an accident. Jim becomes her guide, her companion, her only connection. They laugh. They talk. They fall in love. And the audience is trapped, because you know the truth. And yet, you understand why he did it. That tension is the heart of the movie. Some viewers see Jim as a monster. Others see him as a broken man. And the film refuses to tell you who's right. That's why discussions never end. Because Passengers doesn't ask if this was right. It asks whether you would have been stronger. The most dangerous part is when the viewer realizes something terrifying. You stop judging Jim. You started imagining yourself in his place. And that's when the movie truly works. As Jim and Aurora grow closer, his guilt grows louder. The relationship saves his sanity, but destroys his peace. He knows the truth is a ticking bomb, and bombs always explode. The moment Aurora wakes up, the movie changes tone. Until now, the Avalon felt like a tomb. Silent, frozen, empty. Now lights turn on. Music plays. Rooms feel lived in. The ship doesn't change. The perception does. The Avalon becomes a city again, but only because two people are walking through it. Aurora adjusts quickly. She explores the ship. She asks questions. She laughs. Jim watches her carefully, not as a predator, but as someone terrified of losing what he just gained. This is an important narrative shift. Aurora brings meaning back into Jim's life, but that meaning is built on deception. Their relationship develops slowly. Share meals, long conversations, staring at the stars. Visually, the film warms up. Golden lighting, softer camera movement, slower pacing. This is deliberate. The movie wants the audience to relax because pain hits harder when your guard is down. As Aurora grows happier, Jim grows quieter. The camera lingers on his face. Hesitation, regret, internal conflict. He doesn't confess, not because he's evil, but because once the truth is spoken, everything ends. The reveal doesn't come from Jim. It comes from Arthur, the bartender robot. Arthur speaks calmly, casually, without understanding impact. He explains the truth as a fact, and that makes it devastating. Truth without empathy is brutality. Aurora realizes she was chosen, she was trapped, and her future was stolen. Her reaction isn't immediate screaming. It's disbelief first, then anger, then grief. The movie switches emotional ownership. From this moment on, Aurora is the protagonist. This is where many viewers change completely. Empathy transfers. Jim becomes the cause of suffering. Aurora becomes the victim. And the film lets that pain breathe. No quick forgiveness. No shortcuts. As the relationship breaks, the Avalon begins to malfunction. This isn't coincidence. The ship reflects the emotional state. Systems overload. Alarms trigger. Errors cascade. A crew member wakes up unexpectedly. He confirms this was not meant to happen, and there is no easy solution. Hope appears and dies quickly. The movie shifts genre. Romance becomes survival. Debate becomes action. Someone must go outside the ship. Someone might not come back. Jim steps into open space. No sound. No safety net. No witnesses. This is not heroism. It is confrontation. Jim finally faces the consequences of his decision. Aurora now faces Jim's original dilemma. She can save herself or save him. She understands now, not forgives, not excuses, but understands. And that understanding changes everything. They don't get a perfect ending. They build a livable one. A life of compromise, routine, acceptance. This is not redemption. This is adaptation. Passengers is not driven by plot twists. It is driven by psychological pressure. Each character represents a force that exists inside all of us, and that is why the story feels personal. Jim Preston represents raw, emotional survival. He is not heroism, and he is not evil. He is the instinct to exist, to be seen, and to matter. Jim embodies the fear of invisibility, the fear of dying unloved, and the fear of living a life without meaning. The film asks through him who you become when society disappears and no one is watching. Morality is easier when there are witnesses. Jim is controversial because he is not a monster. If he were cruel, judgment would be simple. But he is kind, humorous, and relatable. The movie forces the audience to confront an uncomfortable idea. Good people can do unforgivable things under extreme conditions. That discomfort fuels endless debate. Aurora Lane represents choice. Not romance and not innocence, but choice itself. She is the future taken away, consent removed, and freedom violated. Her pain is not only emotional, it is existential. The film makes a powerful statement through her suffering. Losing your future can hurt more than losing your life. Aurora does not forgive quickly, and that matters. Her anger validates the audience's outrage and gives voice to the idea that this should never have happened. Without her rage, the film would excuse Jim. Instead, it indicts him without turning him into a caricatured villain. Arthur, the bartender robot, represents truth without empathy. He is logic without compassion, honesty without responsibility, and facts without understanding. Arthur does not lie, and he does not judge. He simply states what is true, and that is what destroys everything. The movie suggests that truth alone is not moral, and that empathy is what gives truth meaning. Gus Mancuso represents institutional morality. He stands for rules, order, and procedure, but he arrives too late. His role is tragic because he can diagnose the problem but cannot undo it. He exists to confirm the worst truth of all. Some choices cannot be repaired, only survived. Jim and Aurora function as two halves of the audience. Jim reflects what a person might do to survive, while Aurora reflects what a person would feel if it happened to them. The viewer shifts constantly between these perspectives, and that tension never fully resolves. Casting plays a critical role in making this work. Chris Pratt brings warmth, humor, and approachability, making Jim feel human before he feels wrong. Jennifer Lawrence brings emotional weight, believable anger, and vulnerability without weakness, preventing the story from romanticizing harm. Together, their performances ground the film ethically and emotionally. This is why Passengers continues to provoke discussion. The characters are not there to be judged easily. They are there to reflect uncomfortable truths back at the audience. One reason Passengers keeps resurfacing online is simple. The real lives of the people who made it echo the movie's themes. Isolation, pressure, choice, and consequence appear not only on screen, but behind it as well. Chris Pratt's personal history adds an unexpected layer to Jim Preston's character. Before becoming a global star, Pratt lived out of a van in Hawaii, worked as a waiter, and spent years without any certainty that success would ever come. He has spoken openly about being nearly broke and feeling invisible during that period of his life. That experience created a deep fear of disappearing without leaving a mark, a fear that mirrors Jim's terror of dying unseen and forgotten aboard the Avalon. This background made Pratt a natural fit for the role. The director needed someone approachable and ordinary, not cold or threatening. Jim had to feel like someone the audience could know. Pratt's warmth and humor accomplish exactly that, making the character relatable before his actions become morally disturbing. During filming, Pratt reportedly asked for fewer distractions on set and more time alone to rehearse scenes of isolation. He wanted the loneliness to feel real rather than simulated. By the end of production, he admitted that spending so much time alone in that environment began to affect him psychologically. That exhaustion and emotional were visible on screen, giving Jim's isolation an authenticity that cannot be faked. Jennifer Lawrence entered Passengers already under intense public scrutiny. She was one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood and constantly analyzed by the media and the public. She hesitated before accepting the role of Aurora Lane because she understood how delicate and controversial the character was. Aurora is not an easy figure to defend, and Lawrence knew that audience reactions could be harsh. Reading the script made her uncomfortable, not because of the romance, but because of the loss of consent at the center of the story. She connected deeply with Aurora's fear of having her future taken away without a choice, and that emotional response carried directly into her performance. When Aurora discovers the truth, her anger feels raw and unfiltered because it was rooted in Lawrence's genuine emotional reaction to the story. After the film's release, public debate exploded around Aurora's role, with some viewers accusing the movie of romanticizing trauma, while others defended it as an honest exploration of human desperation. This real-world controversy mirrored the film's internal conflict, blurring the line between fiction and reality. Michael Sheen's portrayal of Arthur, the bartender robot, added another unsettling dimension. Sheen often performed his scenes alone, speaking to empty space without emotional feedback from other actors. This isolation helped him craft a character that was polite, calm, and deeply unsettling. Arthur does not lie, manipulate, or judge. He simply tells the truth without empathy, and that emotional absence makes his honesty destructive. Lawrence Fishburne's role as Gus Mancuso represents authority and institutional morality. He accepted the part knowing that his character exists only briefly and serves a specific purpose, to confirm that there is no clean solution. Gus arrives too late to prevent the damage, and his presence reinforces the idea that some mistakes cannot be undone, only endured. Fishburne described the role as telling the truth people do not want to hear and then disappearing. Together, the real lives and perspectives of the cast enrich Passengers in subtle ways. Their personal experiences with pressure, isolation, and judgment bleed into their performances, making the film feel emotionally grounded despite its futuristic setting. This connection between the actors' realities and the story's themes is one of the reasons Passengers continues to generate discussion. Viewers are not just reacting to fictional characters, but to real human emotions embedded within them. On screen, Passengers feels elegant and effortless, but behind the camera, it was anything but. This was not a green screen first production. Director Morton Tildum pushed for practical sets wherever possible because he believed actors perform differently when the world around them is real. That creative choice increased realism, but it also increased difficulty. One of the most iconic sequences in the film is the zero-gravity pool scene. What many viewers do not realize is that this scene was not created purely with visual effects. The pool was built inside a massive rotating set, and the entire environment spun around the actors to simulate weightlessness. The actors were strapped into harnesses, rotated repeatedly, and required to control their breathing and timing with extreme precision. The result looked beautiful on screen, but the experience was physically brutal. Both leads reported dizziness, nausea, and muscle strain. Some takes were repeated dozens of times until the movement of the water and bodies felt convincing. Filming scenes that appear weightless is anything but relaxing. Every movement had to be carefully controlled, every gesture rehearsed, and every moment coordinated with cables and rotation. By the end of long shooting days, muscles were shaking, concentration dropped, and exhaustion set in. That fatigue fed directly into the performances. The tiredness and strain visible on screen were not entirely acting. Unlike many science fiction films, Passengers deliberately minimized the use of full digital environments. Tildum wanted real corridors, real scale, and real silence. As a result, the Avalon was constructed as a massive walkable environment. Actors could physically wander the ship, feel its emptiness, and experience its scale. This helped create a genuine sense of isolation. At times, actors reportedly got lost inside the set itself, reinforcing the psychological effect of being trapped in an endless structure. The original script for Passengers was darker than the version that reached theaters. Early drafts leaned more heavily into psychological horror, portrayed Jim in a harsher light, and offered less emotional relief. During production, studio executives expressed concern not about quality, but about audience rejection. There was fear that a version too bleak or morally uncompromising would alienate viewers. As a result, adjustments were made. The romance was emphasized, the third act leaned more toward action and survival, and the ending was shaped to offer a sense of hope. These compromises kept the film accessible to a wider audience, but also fueled later criticism. Some viewers argued that the film should have been bleaker and more disturbing, while others believed the balance was necessary for the story to function. The score played a crucial role in guiding audience emotion. Without music, many scenes of isolation would have felt unbearable. The soundtrack softened moments of moral tension and acted as an emotional companion for the viewer, much like the robots served as companions for Jim. While no major accidents occurred during filming, there were several close calls. Equipment overheated, safety harnesses malfunctioned, and small fires broke out during technical sequences. These incidents heightened tension on set and served as a reminder of how fragile control really was. Months spent filming inside enclosed environments took a psychological toll on the cast. Jennifer Lawrence later admitted that being trapped in those spaces for long periods began to feel real. The simulated isolation blurred into genuine emotional fatigue. That residue remained in the performances and became part of the film's texture. Understanding how difficult Passengers was to make changes how the film is perceived. When viewers learn about the physical strain, creative compromises, and emotional exhaustion behind the scenes, the story gains weight. Passengers was never a modest project. From the very beginning, the studio understood that this film carried significant risk. This was not a sequel, not a reboot, and not part of a shared cinematic universe. It was an original science fiction story built around a morally disturbing premise. And original sci-fi has always been one of the hardest bets in Hollywood. The production budget alone was estimated at around $110 million, with tens of millions more spent on global marketing. In total, the investment easily exceeded $150 million. For a film without superheroes, alien villains, or franchise safety nets, this was a bold gamble. Before its release, expectations were extremely high. The studio hoped Passengers would become a prestige science fiction romance with strong international appeal and long box office legs. Some insiders even suggested it could be the Titanic of space, combining spectacle, emotion, and star power into a massive commercial success. The cast appeared perfectly positioned to support that ambition, with two major stars and a visually impressive production design. But alongside those expectations, controversy was already waiting. When the film premiered, the initial reactions revealed a sharp divide. Critics and general audiences responded very differently. Many critics focused on the moral framing of Jim's decision, questioning whether the film treated his actions too gently and whether the romantic tone softened a fundamentally traumatic act. Some argued that the story asked difficult questions but avoided fully confronting their consequences. Others felt that the choice of perspective encouraged empathy where condemnation might have been more appropriate. These critiques dominated early reviews and shaped the film's critical reputation. General audiences, however, often reacted in a more emotionally engaged way. Instead of rejecting the film outright, many viewers debated it passionately. They connected with the characters, argued about motivations, and defended opposing interpretations of Jim's actions. Rather than silence, Passengers generated conversation, and conversation is what keeps a film alive. At the box office, the movie performed solidly, though not spectacularly. It earned roughly $300 million worldwide, with particularly strong results in international markets. While it did not become the cultural phenomenon some had hoped for, it was far from a failure. More importantly, the film found a long second life through streaming, television, and online discussion. One of the most persistent debates to emerge after the release centered on the idea of an alternate version of the story. Many viewers argued that if the film had been told entirely from Aurora's perspective, Jim would have appeared far more monstrous and the moral horror more explicit. Others countered that such a version would have removed the uncomfortable empathy that makes the film unique. The fact that this debate continues years later demonstrates the film's lasting impact. Over time, Passengers began to be reevaluated, as isolation and loneliness became more familiar experiences in the real world. The film's themes resonated more strongly. Many viewers revisiting the movie years later found themselves understanding it differently than they had upon first release. This shift in perception highlighted one of the film's greatest strengths. Passengers does not depend solely on spectacle or novelty. It survives because it asks questions that do not fade with time. By combining financial risk, mixed reception, and long-term cultural discussion, the film secured a form of relevance that cannot be measured purely by opening weekend numbers. The ongoing argument surrounding Passengers is its true legacy. Remove the stars, remove the ship, remove the technology. Passengers still works. Because this movie is not about the future. It is about human fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of living a life that never mattered to anyone else. Space is simply the cleanest place to expose that fear, because there is nowhere to hide and no one to blame. The film does not ask whether Jim was right. It asks something far more uncomfortable. What would you become if no one was watching? Morality feels solid inside society, but remove witnesses, remove consequences, and remove time, and morality begins to bend. That is not a science fiction idea. It is a human one. Many viewers misunderstand the ending of Passengers. This is not a fairy tale resolution, and it is not forgiveness wrapped in romance. It is something colder and more honest. Jim and Aurora do not erase the past. They live with it. The film suggests a difficult truth. Some choices cannot be redeemed. They can only be carried. Aurora's decision to write matters deeply. Writing becomes an act of resistance against erasure. It is how she transforms loss into meaning and silence into testimony. By telling the story, she claims ownership of what happened to her and ensures that their lives mattered, even if no one else ever sees it. The guard at the end of the film is not decoration. It is rebellion. Life growing inside a machine, humanity asserting itself inside steel and code. The message is subtle but powerful. Humans do not only survive, they create meaning, even in cages. Passengers makes a statement about morality that refuses simplicity. The film never excuses Jim, but it also refuses to reduce him to a monster. It shows something disturbing. Extreme isolation does not turn people evil. It turns them desperate. Desperation is harder to judge than cruelty, and that discomfort is intentional. When the film was first released, many viewers were not ready for it. Over time, the world changed. Isolation became familiar, loneliness became common, and digital connection replaced physical presence. As a result, Passengers gained new meaning. Many people revisiting the film years later found themselves understanding it more deeply than before. The story aged better than expected because it speaks to fears that do not disappear. Passengers refuses to answer its own question. There is no final verdict and no clean moral lesson. Instead, the film hands the burden back to the audience. That is why the discussion never ends. Unanswered questions live forever. Passengers does not ask who is right. It asks who you would be if loneliness were your only companion and no one else was left to judge your choices. Now it's your turn. Was Jim a villain, or just painfully human? Write your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoy films that challenge your morals, subscribe for more deep movie breakdowns.